Welcome to the March meeting of the Dull Man's Club of Clinton. I'm Perry Ingano, the head dull man of town, apparently. We've been meeting since November, and we usually have a much smaller crowd. We have a lot of laughs and a little conversation, usually in the next room over. Today we're on a much more serious topic, and that is Lyme disease. This is Tom Valerio, a colleague of mine for many years who has Lyme disease. He's been involved in speaking throughout central Massachusetts. He's part of some support groups in the area, and he's here to talk about the awareness and prevention of Lyme disease for the next hour. And thank you again for coming. Tom?
All right, thank you. Well, thank you for coming. We didn't know if it would just be myself and my wife, but there's some of you, we filled the room, right, Mr. Ingano? You were worried about that? Okay. Well, welcome to the Senior Center. I've talked at a couple other senior centers with you, Michelle. We've gone to a couple, and they're nice. The people are nice, but there's nothing like this, I don't think, in Central Mass. This home, it's a home, and I think when you come in here, at least what I do, you come in here, you feel like you're going to a home, and everybody here is terrific. You come here, you're very well received by everyone, and I want to thank Debbie Gutzel, who's helped us. Where are you, Mr. Ingano? Who's helped us a lot in getting this organization going. It was the end of the summer last year, and my friend Terry Ingano said, I'm starting a club, and it's going to meet at the senior center, and I want to increase and have a membership. And he said, you're the very first person that I thought of for this club, which I thought was pretty nice, because there's a lot of people in Clinton, I said, well, what is it? What's the name of this club? He said, it's a Dull Men's Club. And I said, I can't tell you the language I use, but basically, I said, what are you, a wise guy, But he says, no, he was serious. And I said to Mr. I said, there's someone else that I know, a friend of ours that we have in common. I can't mention any of his name, but he'd be perfect for the Dull Men's Club. And I looked it up. There is a Dull Men's Club. It actually is, and there's a lot of different clubs throughout the United States, and I think even in England. Did you know that? You didn't know that. So there's a lot of us. There's a lot of dull men around. It all started with the New York Varsity Club. Did you know that? I did some research, and there was men sitting around that they didn't belong to. There was clubs within clubs, and they didn't belong to the skiing club. They didn't belong to the lacrosse club, and they finally just said, "Gee, we don't belong to anything. Let's start our own club." And in fact, they did. So I looked it up. You can look up anything online. And the question is, what is the Dull Men's Club? So let me just give you a quick thing. It is where dull men, and this is very important, it was where dull men and women who appreciate dull men share thoughts and experiences about ordinary things. So thank you. You do appreciate it, I hope. And that's the truth. And also, like most organizations, it has a mission statement. And we have our mission statement. I don't know why, but I had to write this down, but it's so lengthy. And our mission statement is, it's okay to be dull. Okay? That's it. Took a lot of time and went into that, I want to, before I start, right here in this room, there's a lot of people who've worked so hard to help the Lyme community. And I just want to introduce some of these people to those of you, that are not familiar with this. And giving the talk today, it's kind of hard because I have some people here really don't know a lot about Lyme, and so you have to give the basics. They have no idea. And I got people here who unfortunately are veterans. So I'm going to try to give this line in two parts. The basics, and then what happens after if you know you got bit, because that's the critical time. And I used to talk about prevention and awareness to people, and I'd always get all the basic things, how you get Lyme, how to avoid it. But nobody talks about what happens after you get bit. So that's a section that if I forget, bring me back to that, okay? First of all, I wanted to introduce Michelle Miller. Met Michelle about 4 years ago. When you have Lyme disease, you get isolated. You lose your friendships. You can't work. I've been fortunate that that didn't happen to me, but most people, you have the disease, but the problems that you can have as a result of the disease is terrible. And you really have no one to talk to. And Lyme disease is the most controversial disease in the world. You can have doctors who are brilliant who will tell you you do not have Lyme disease, and across the table you absolutely do. And so there's this controversy regarding it. And I'm going to explain a little bit why that exists today. But I want to get back to Michelle Miller. I heard, I don't know how I heard, but I heard there was going to be a support group starting in Worcester. And it was going to be at a library, not the main library downtown, but one of the satellite libraries over by Norton's. And it was in the cellar, actually, our first meeting. And Michelle had that meeting there. So I went, and I don't know, there was probably 18 people. I think, I don't know if you ladies were there yet. And we just went around, talked about what's happening to us and how Lyme disease basically can change and destroy your life. And it was a pretty good meeting. And at the end, Michelle spoke a little bit, and she said, well, I'm very sorry what's happened to you people, but she said, I'm going to make a difference. And you did. You said that, Michelle. Don't tell me you said that. So I went home, and I said to my wife, said, well, how did the meeting go? I explained everything to her, and but I said, there was a lady there that said she's going to make a difference for Lyme disease, you know. Well, you certainly did. Michelle started the Central Mass Lyme Foundation in Worcester. We meet once a month. Some of the best speakers come in. She runs, and people help her because it's such a big job. It's incredible, the job. She has a Lyme symposium, and she'll tell you about that in October of every year. And the best doctors in Lyme disease in the East Coast come and speak at this symposium in Worcester. And there's hundreds of people that attend. And you can tell us when that later on when that meeting will be, because I think you already started planning it.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. You'll have to, because so much work goes into it. So you have Michelle Miller, and I want to thank her for the help you've given my family with it. You know, and I have other people here. These two fresh ladies right here. There's Darlene DeBarra, Paula Denoncourt. They work. Spent a lot of time and they helped Michelle with the Lyme disease in prevention and awareness. Darlene is the big shot with the Audubon Society. All right, average. No, you are. And she gives talks, and we all try to give talks in schools just to make people aware of what's happening. Paula is a nutritionist. She gives talks on nutrition, and particularly on sugar. You should eliminate that from your diet because it feeds the bacteria. And she's already talked. Well, you say yes and you give talks on that, but I'm going to tell everybody.
You tell everybody I cheat once in a while.
Well, I'm going to tell you. After one meeting, we had a coffee at Gerardo's. And I think it was 3 cannolis and a couple of, yeah, she consumed a lot of pastry. But I'm sure you would never do that again. No, I know. But they've worked very, very hard. I also want to introduce, he just came in late, Fred Cheslick, down the end there. He runs a support group in Concord, Mass. And I heard about this at the library in Concord, and I always liked that library. It's like this, the woodwork, everything. It's similar to this house you have here. I call it a house. And I said, I'll go to the meeting. So I went to the meeting, and it was a great meeting. There was quite a few people there, and I talked to Fred afterwards. And I said to him, Fred, you son of a gun, you're very lucky you live here in Concord, remember? And Fred said, no, I don't live in Concord. I live up 117. So I thought it was Bolton or Stowe. He says, I live in Clinton. Well, he's almost my neighbor, you know. It's just amazing. So he's done a lot for Lyme. And people that work for Lyme, it's because it's touched you personally. Michelle lost her mom as a direct result of Lyme disease. And you people have your families are filled with Lyme disease.
17.
How many?
17.
17. Wow.
Family members.
Yeah, and I in Clinton here, I never tell people, but my whole family has Lyme disease. I don't know where I got it. I might have got it at the golf course. I worked summers. I don't know. My son got it working for DCR. He was bit. You know, they get bit all the time from ticks and Lyme disease. So that's how he got it. I also want to thank Joe and Mary Pat Garrity, because you don't know them, but they're right down there. But we needed to get a bill passed in Massachusetts that would change the way Lyme disease is treated in the medical community. And I desperately wanted to do something. And I said, what the heck could I ever possibly do, you know? But I know that Mary Pat Garrity is the sister of Tom Farragher, who's a writer for the Boston Globe, who's written a lot of articles. He's still employed there. He was he was involved in for the Spotlight team that helped break the terrible, you know, problems with the priest and abuse and so forth. So I said to Mary Pat, I said, can you help me? Can you talk to your brother? And can he write an article for us in the Globe that would help us get this bill passed? And she said, well, come up to the house. I'll talk to you about it. We sat on your front porch, and I told her about Lyme disease. I told her, and she really got interested when I told her the effect that it has on children. And she says, it's funny you would come today, because tomorrow we're having a big family picnic, and I'll see my brother, Tom Farragher. And she says, I'll talk to him. The next night, he called. And I told him about Lyme disease a little bit, but sometimes I can't express myself well enough to explain how important it is and how difficult and what it does to your families and so forth. So I said, I'm trying to think of how I could do this. So I know a clinical psychologist in Newton, and she's in a book called Cure Unknown, and her name is Sheila Statlander. And she's had 3 children with Lyme disease, and they've suffered for years. They're doing well now. But I said, if I could bring this doctor and Tom Farragher together, maybe something can happen from this. And so I said the best way, and my wife wanted to do this because it was to take them to dinner at Legal Seafood down in Chestnut Hill in Brookline. So I called Tom Farragher, and he said, yeah, I'll go to lunch there. I love that place. And Dr. Statlander says, yeah, it's only a mile from my office. Her office is in downtown Newton. And I brought them together. We had a nice lunch. They must have talked easily for like an hour afterwards. And Tom said, I will write an article for you. I will help you. So the time went on, and every once in a while he'd email me. He said, I haven't forgotten you. I'm going to do this. But then it came time to pass this bill, and it was right down to the wire. But it was that week it was either, if it got past that week, we'd have to start all over again to get the bill passed. And I called him. He says, all right, now's the time. I'm going to do it. And he wrote an article, and it was terrific, and it was very, very helpful to get this bill passed. Up until the passage of this bill, you could only get treatment if you came back positive on the blood test. And I'll tell you about the test. They're highly ineffective. They produce a lot of false negatives. And that was the only way you could get help from doctors, because it was the law. Now, after the passage of this bill, a doctor can treat you just based on clinical symptoms. So this was a big bill for us. And it was hard. Tom told me how difficult it was to write this, because he was limited, and I forget what he said. I think it was like 680 words. He said, for me, he said, I had no idea what Lyme, how encompassing it is and how big a story it is. For me to get into the story, tell the meat of the story, and get out of the story, he says, it's tough. It's a tough thing. And 680 words sounds like a lot, but you count a couple of paragraphs, it wasn't. But he did it, and he did a great job. And that helped us get that bill passed. So I want to thank you very, very much. I have a good friend of mine who's in the Groton Lyme disease support group and runs that, Barbara Donovan over here. And we're looking for a new location to have that. We had it at a restaurant. We're kind of, they changed ownerships, so we don't know where we're going to have that. But she has 3 children who had Lyme disease. She has Lyme disease. I keep forgetting that you also have it. You know, she never complains, never says anything, and you forget. But she's very active in Lyme disease. So there's a lot of people right in this room that have, and I want to thank you. You're helpful to all of us in Lyme. I also want to thank, and then I'll get into this, Harold Naughton from Clinton. I went down to talk to him when this bill was proposed. He's our state rep. And I said, I wonder if you can help me. He said, well, come in. What is this Lyme disease? And we talked for a long time about it. He said, geez, I never realized what it can do. He said, I'll go in tomorrow and I'll co-sign the bill, which he did. And he talked it up down in Boston. He was very, very helpful, those of you from Clinton, to help us with that. And there's not too many people here from Clinton, is there? There's, yeah, okay. I wanted. Right. Lisa, you're from Clinton. Evelyn. But I just got to tell you a quick joke. And then my daughter says, don't tell any stories. Just do your talk. But we were in the Groton Lyme disease support group, and we had a meeting afterwards. And one of the ladies there said to me, we're having coffee afterwards. She said to me, Tom, can I ask you a question? I said, sure, go ahead. She said, are you tough? I said, what? I didn't remember. I said, I didn't hear you. What did you say? She said, are you tough? I said, well, now I'm an old man. She's a young lady. When are you going to get the truth in that situation? You know? But I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't want to embellish it, Mr. Garrity. You know. I said, well, you know, I can take care of myself. You know. She said, I said, but why did you ask me that? You grew up in Clinton with all those Russians. I said, what the hell? What are you talking about, all those Russians? Come to find out, after we talked it over a little bit, she heard about the Russian Icon Museum that we have in Clinton, so she just figured I was tough. And I would have been if there was all Russians, you know? But there was just Irish kids when I was here, you know? All right, enough talk. When you talk about Lyme, there's 3 words that you have to familiarize yourself with. And they are endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. Clinton is in a very highly endemic area for Lyme disease. You do not have to be walking in a reservoir. You can just walk through your backyard, you can get it. Everybody throughout the whole East Coast thinks that they're the most highly endemic area. I see that written all the time. People in southern New Hampshire, we're in the most highly endemic area. Well, let them win that particular contest. I personally, unfortunately, we are in a very highly endemic area. It's an epidemic. There's so many people that have Lyme disease and have no realization that they have it. And I'll explain that to you. It's just incredible. And if they say something's an epidemic, usually it's just in one area that people have it. It's not spread out too much. Well, Lyme is all along the East Coast, all along the Great Lakes. These are the areas that most likely have it, but it can be anywhere in the United States. And in the West Coast, from like middle California northwards up through Oregon and Washington, it's unbelievable how many people have it. And it's also a pandemic. That means worldwide. Europe has a very severe problem with Lyme disease, particularly Germany. And they do a lot of research there, though, and they have new methods of treating it. And we know some people who have gone over there for treatment. And some say it helped them, some say, no, not too much of a difference. And what they do is they take it and they raise your body temperature up to like 106 degrees, right to the edge. I don't know, you go to 17 and you can start having problems. And supposedly that kills the bacteria. But we had that speaker who came and he was much better. I can't think of his name now, but we saw him a year later and he was kind of getting sick again. He was going to go back. What was it? George Papadopoulos, that ice? I can't say anything. Snuffleupagus. No. Yeah. So he has to go back. But it did help him a little bit. Well, I want to just tell you how, everybody says, and I say it myself, when I was a kid, we played outside. Not like the kids today, so it's kind of a badge of honor, Well, it's true, we did. And there was no Lyme disease, but there were ticks. Not as many as we have now, but the ticks have been around for like 15 million years. And so we had ticks back then, but I never remember them. But we never had deer either. We'd play at the reservoir, we'd play through the woods, clamshell up in the acre. I never saw a deer. Now, they're in our backyard. It's like, I don't even tell everyone. It's like seeing squirrels. There's so many of them. 150, 200 years ago, there was very little forest area in Massachusetts. Everything was farmland, so the deer population got reduced quite a bit. Now, there's much more forest area, and there was not as much hunting, so the deer they're everywhere now. And the deer are the ones that carry the adult ticks. All right, so if you have deer in your yard, you have a problem. You have to be careful. This is what the CDC, our Center for Disease Control, tells us. For a long time, they said nothing about Lyme disease. I personally feel they've dropped the ball when it comes to Lyme disease, because their full name is not just Center for Disease Control, it's Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They have not done that much for prevention, and they should. Well, they finally came out 2 years ago and stated there was, in every year, like 300,000 people acquire Lyme disease. That's a lot of people. That comes down to, if you do the math, I did it, 5,770 a week get Lyme disease. 822 people a day get Lyme disease. So it's a huge problem. The Center for Disease Control, I don't know. They've got to start doing more for this. Every year, in late summer, people start getting triple E, West Nile virus and triple E. These are serious disease conditions. But last year, I think there was like 8 or 9 people got that disease. Well, 2 or 3 of them did die, so it's nothing to fool around with. But it'll be in the papers, it'll be on the news, they'll cancel nighttime Little League baseball games. 882 people have Lyme disease a day, and not too much is done with it. So that has to change, and that's what some of us try to do. We're talking about prevention and awareness. Each year, I could never remember these statistics, so I have to carry this. I've had Lyme for 18 years, and it's affected my ability. You start getting cognitive problems, and of course, if some of my friends were here today, and they would tell you I had that since I was a kid, but I really haven't. It's fairly recent. But Lyme disease is the fastest growing condition. Every year, 17,000 people get hepatitis. Colon cancer, 136,000. These are just statistics. Breast cancer, 232,000 get that. Lyme disease, 300,000 a year. And that 300,000, I'm telling you, is a gross underestimation. There's so many more that get it than that. And they don't know it. I'll explain that to you too. The problem is this: there's no reliable test for Lyme disease. To this day, there's no reliable test. It's a blood draw, but it's what they call an indirect test. And Lyme disease is a bacterial spirochete. That's what it is. They cannot test specifically for that. They test your body's reaction to the Lyme disease. Your body, after it realizes you have Lyme disease, it starts creating what they call antibodies. These are things that your body produces to fight the Lyme disease. They're enzymes, protein enzymes. If you get a tick on you today, and then you go and your doctor gives you a blood test for Lyme disease the next day, 100% it's going to come back negative. It takes your body time to produce these antibodies. So if you get tested too early and the doctors don't know this, that realization is not there, you're going to get a negative, so you don't follow through with any Lyme treatment. If you get tested too late, my immune system has been devastated, and if you have Lyme disease, so your body is not producing antibodies, and you come back with a negative. So the tests are very, very poor. The poorest of all of them is called an ELISA test. That's the very first test the doctor will give you. It's a blood draw. If you took 100 people with definite Lyme disease, test them with this ELISA test, at least 50 or 60 will come back negative. And they have another second test called a Western blot, which is a little bit more definitive, a little bit better, but it must be a little bit more expensive. So they don't give that. They give you the ELISA test first, which is the least effective, and even then, if that comes back positive, what do? They say, well, we got to make sure. We'll give you the Western blot. That's when they give you the Western blot. It's crazy what's happening out there. And the doctors, they just don't know. This wasn't taught. This is a relatively recent problem. And when these doctors go to med school, when they have gone to med school, it never came up. Lyme disease really wasn't, it was around, but they didn't know. So you've got a problem. If you can't come back with a positive, you couldn't get treatment. You could not get treatment. Your doctor would not treat you. But now, in Massachusetts anyways, a doctor can treat you just based on clinical symptoms. That's what that bill was. So that's made somewhat of a difference for people. They can get treatment. The trouble is, Lyme disease does not show up in everyone with one specific symptom. All of us are different. So it's difficult. The doctors have a terribly hard time. If I was a doctor, the last thing in the world I would want to see walk in my office is someone with Lyme disease. You want, as a doctor, you would like to see somebody with the flu. You know that you could just give them water and make believe it's medicine, and after a week of rest, no, really, after a week of rest, they're going to get better. You'd see them mostly, not all, but you see them on the street. They thank you for that medication. I appreciate it. But Lyme disease, if they're going to get better, it takes months. It takes a long time. If you catch it right away, that's another thing. All right? If you know you got bit, you go to your doctor and he starts treating it right away, you have a much better chance. What are the chances of getting treatment right away for Lyme disease? They're almost non-existent. You go to your primary care physician and you say to him, well, I got a tick. It was right here. You see the red mark around it. And he'll start treating you right away with doxycycline with hopefully 28 days minimum. They used to give 2 pills. 2 doxycycline, and that never did it, you know. The other problem is most people don't get, you hear the bullseye rash, you hear that all the time. The majority of people now don't get a bullseye rash. They don't get any rash. So you got a problem. What does the doctor do? He looks at it, where was the bite, right? You know, wherever it is. And then he'll say, well, how long was the tick attached? Because they think it has to be attached 24 to 48 hours before you can get the disease itself, before it can get into your body, the bacteria, before it gets to you. Well, they're changing that now. They've gone to 12 to 24. So they don't really know that, you know. But they won't treat you. If you say, well, I was out in the woods yesterday, oh, well, you know, it's only been 20 hours, you know, there's no way you could have Lyme disease. See what happens, though. That's what they'll say. See what happens, and let me know. They say that to you. Call me or call one of these people here, because we'll tell you what happens if it's let go. chances are it's hard to get treatment right away. Even now, and a lot more is known about Lyme disease than it was before. The other problem, most people never know they got bit, have absolutely no idea. When a tick bites you, for some reason, well, not for some reason, they emit or put a fluid into you first. So the doctors and the researchers studied that fluid. This is what they found. They found a substance that is like Coumadin. It actually thins your blood, makes the blood flow a little bit better, so they need blood meals to go from one stage to the other. So it has a Coumadin, it has a pain reducer in this substance, so it kind of dulls the area. You'll never feel the bite. It has a substance that's like an antihistamine. You know, you get a mosquito bite, you get a little lump and it gets itchy. No, that doesn't happen with Lyme disease. And the last thing they found in it is a substance like a glue-like substance that encapsulates the bite, helps the tick stay attached to you, and at the same time stops the blood from oxidizing so that they can get their feed. And you never know this is taking place. And usually the tick that does, they go through 3 stages. The one that does it is what they call the nymph stage. If you took a pencil, perfectly vertical, and twisted a little bit and left a little mark on a piece of paper, that's the size of a nymph tick. So you never know. You just never know. And if you never know, you still start to get sick. You get the symptoms anyways. You'll still get the symptoms. And there's all kinds of symptoms depending on how long you've had the tick. I was, I don't know, bitten, at least 16, 17 years ago. Could have been before then. I have no idea. So I have a lot of neuropathy now. I just had nerve biopsies down in Boston. I have what is called small C fiber neuropathy. Small fiber neuropathy. That translates to a lot of nerve pain. You can't sleep. The insomnia you have is terrible. It's just unbelievable. It's like you drank a gallon of coffee. I mean, I could stay up for 2 days. There's some medication I take that helps me so that I can get some sleep. But you start having all kinds of problems. I have a lot of cognitive problems. I went down to Cumberland Farms here over in Lancaster last week. I went in, I paid for the lady for the gas. I went back out and I got in my truck and I drove away. I never pumped the gas. I swear to God. And this isn't, I know you're thinking, well, the guy's 75, what do you expect, But it's not that, it really isn't. You have these cognitive problems. And it's scary. I have what they call word retrieval problems. It could be a coffee cup. I can't think of the word. I start describing it. I say, well, it's a container. I'll say it to my wife, Evelyn. You put liquid in it, and then finally she'll say, "Where's the coffee?" I say, "Yeah, the coffee cup." So this happens not just with old men like me, but it happens with kids, and that's a terrible problem. When a kid gets Lyme disease, particularly if they're young, and they don't, as a parent, you don't know they got bit. You don't know what is called the educational basis or basic for this kid. In other words, you don't know if because he's so young, probably kindergarten or first grade, you don't know if he's a good student, if he has a low IQ. You have no idea that it's Lyme. As he gets older, then you can kind of compare things. You can say, geez, little Jimmy was a great student. All of a sudden now, he's getting poor grades. He doesn't want to go to school. He has these medical problems. Never realize, the average parent, you would never realize that it's Lyme disease. The people that are most likely to get Lyme disease are kids in the age 5 and 11. They're outside a lot. They're running through the brush and they're having a good time. They are the ones, unfortunately, and it affects them throughout their life. If the parent never knows, they go through this negative progression, medical progression, and start having all these problems. it's tough. It's a tough thing. It can show up in a kid. It can show up. Doctors think now a lot of kids now with autism. This is one thing that possibly can cause that autism. You know, they have they're diagnosed with ADHD, all these different symptoms, and it'll hamper this kid throughout his life. Eventually, if he's fortunate enough, if you have parents persistent enough, and he goes to the right doctors, it'll be diagnosed. But usually it isn't. It's not caught. And I just, it's tough. Let me just, I lose my train of thought, but let me just give you some base.
We just said you're doing wonderful.
Great.
Pardon?
You're doing great.
Excellent, your cheering section.
Oh, I thought you were fooling around. I was like a teacher. I was going to keep you after. You were after school, darling. No, thank you very much. But let me tell you about ticks. First of all, people think, I know this one lady, she wears a hat all the time because when they fall out of trees, they're not going to fall on her head. Well, they don't fall out of trees. They don't fly. They can't jump. They quest. That's the term they use. And they climb up from the ground, usually something like that. They get at the very tip of the blade of grass, and they just sit there with their front paws open. Like I have one. In Clinton, the scientists don't know, but ticks are huge. Okay? You got me this tick. Thank you very, very much. This is what they look like. And they cling on to the grass and to the branches, but they have these two like Velcro. And you walk by, you brush up against them, they latch onto your clothing. And they always try to move upward. And for some reason, I think because around your head, the skin is very, very thin, and they can get into your scalp, and they can just sit there. But they can be obstructed on the way up. You know, if they go under your underwear and so forth, they'll stop. And they can be found anywhere on your body, anywhere. So if you go in the woods, you should check and make sure. If your kids go in the woods, just check them if you can. They're hard to see, but they're there, unfortunately. So they latch onto you, and some of their favorite areas are behind the knee. It's a kind of a warm area, and the skin is not too thick. They love belly buttons. They just snuggle right in there. They can climb up, and usually people find them on their head, on their hairline, on the back of their head. That's why they assume that they fell out of a tree, they jumped on their head. They just climb up your body all the time. That's how they get up there. And I can see ticks. Remember, Miss Billy? I saw them, all right? You got to know what to look for. But along rail trails, you'll see them all the time. On the edge of the trail, the grass that grows up right on the edge, that's where you see them. And I walk sometimes in Sterling on that rail trail, but the one I like the most is in West Boylston. The West Boylston Rail Trail. It runs along the Quinnipiac River. And I see ticks there all the time. So as I walk along, there's a lot of people there all the time. And if I see someone, sometimes I see people walking, I can't stop and give this dissertation to every person. They would just either take a swing at me or just walk away. But I see people walking with little kids, and the kids are walking through the grass, and I have to tell them. Sometimes I can be talking to people, and I can say, can I just show you something? And I'll see a tick. It works out perfectly for me, you know? And I'll pull it out at the very tip of the blade of grass. I said, you see this? You check your kid tonight. And hopefully they do. I took my brother-in-law, because I don't think he believed me. I said, I was out walking on the rail trail today. The ticks were everywhere. And he said, can I go with you? I said, yeah. And on the way out there, I'm saying to myself, what if I don't find any? The guy will never, ever believe me again. But we got lucky, and we saw a lot of them, you know. Once after a meeting with you, Michelle, and before I leave, make sure, if you want to have a go to a place, the Central Mass Lyme Foundation has meetings the second Saturday of every month,
It's the Saturday.
and they're at, what's the address?
90 Holden Street in Worcester.
90 Holden Street in Worcester. And it has a lot of good speakers about Lyme disease. I forgot about that. I'm talking here and I'm sorry. I introduced a lot of people here today that are important to Lyme disease. I never mentioned, but I want to now, I want to mention my wife, Evelyn, because she's taking care of my two kids who have been sick for so long. She's taken care of me for 52 years, so you've taken care of 3 kids. I think a marriage, a husband and wife, they have to work together. And the husband is designed to protect the family for a quick, immediate threat. But you can't beat a woman as a primary care person for someone who is chronically ill. No man can do that. And I see mothers all the time taking care of their kids, and boy, they're fighters, I mean, I can tell a doctor I really have it, but you tell some of these mothers that their kids aren't sick, and you got a problem. And it's just long-term care. I don't know, God bless all of you. And my wife Evelyn says to me sometime, honey, I don't know what I'm going to do without you. And every time she says that, I'm saying to myself, holy Christ, what if? So, thank you, Evelyn. Yeah. So, let me go a little bit further and tell you some other things. All ticks come in 3 different sizes. To complete the tick's life cycle, it's a 2-year period, takes 2 years. They start off, and they need a blood meal to go through these 3 different stages. In the fall, a tick will lay eggs, probably up to 2,000 eggs under the leaves. They survive. People think, well, it's very cold, they'll die. Well, they don't. They're designed to. They live in Canada. The Canadian government says there's no such thing as Lyme disease in Canada. I've met people in doctor's office who come from Canada to get treatment. They did studies, and you have to get down to like 30 degrees below zero before they start to kill off some of the ticks, so forth. So they lay their eggs in the fall. They hatch in the spring. They're called larvae when the first stage. When a tick first starts out, they have no diseases. They don't have all these different diseases. They acquire them through their first feedings. They feed on small little mice, chipmunks, things like that. And that's where they start to pick up all these different disease conditions, all these viruses, and what they call co-infections. I haven't talked about that at all. We could meet next week again about those. But when you get Lyme disease, you don't just get Lyme disease. You get other diseases. You get one called Bartonella. It's a bacterial disease too. That causes a lot of damage. It causes a lot of psychiatric problems. People don't realize Lyme causes psychiatric problems in individuals. The other one is called, and it's very common now in this area, it's called Babesia. It's not a bacterial infection, it's a protozoa, but it's like malaria. And I have that, I have Babesia. If I tell everybody I have all these things, nobody will sit with me and have coffee, but it's okay, it's all right, to have it. But I remember when I first acquired that, you were gone that particular weekend, and I got so sick, and it's just like malaria. I had drenching sweats, and I was freezing, and I was just weak, and it was tough. I thought I was, it was it, I said, I was going to tell you about the money I have hidden in the house, but thank God, But you get these, you don't just get Lyme disease. When you get bit by a tick, you get all these other conditions. And the word that they use, the doctors use, is called synergistic. Every one of these co-infections, they help each other. They help the Lyme to survive by lowering your immune system. And then all hell breaks out. You can get these co-infections and never get Lyme also. So that's another thing. They test you and they start, you don't have Lyme disease. You know how many times I've been told that before I got tested? And I was going to a hospital in Boston, Beth Israel. This is before I was diagnosed. With the best doctors. They did every conceivable test for me. And they were in these beautiful offices, all glass, and on the walls they had all the placards, everything, where they've been, where they've studied. But it took a doctor in Harvard. She was a neurologist, Dr. Ruiz. I don't know if you remember, she no longer has her practice. But she said to me, she said, you know, because they diagnosed me with MS. And this is where it gets controversial. Did I have MS? Yes. This is my interpretation now. I have no medical background. I went up to the University of New England, and I graduated, Mr. Ingano. I have documentation, okay? All right. I had it's a big predominant medical school now, it really is, but I didn't take any of those courses. But I'm telling you, this is what they told me, and yeah, I had MS. I had the symptoms of MS exactly. If you look at what they are in a textbook, you would see that. But the causative factor was Lyme disease. Lyme disease caused this. Now people say, well, so what? What's the difference? Just treat it. Well, there's a big difference because sometimes people who have MS, they're treated with steroids to lower the inflammation and all the other parts of what MS is. However, if you have Lyme disease and they give you steroids, it lowers your immune system, well, the Lyme goes crazy. And every aspect of Lyme disease gets magnified and gets worse. It gets deeper embedded in your system. Doctors don't agree. There's two standards of care for Lyme disease. One of them comes from the Infectious Disease Society of America. Are these people smart people? Yes, they are. They went to all these schools. They're sometimes the best of the best. They are. They'll treat you a certain way. There's another group of doctors from what they call ILADS, International Lyme and Associated Diseases. The treatment for them for Lyme is just the opposite. It's different. It's altogether different. One night, I had a dream. This is no kidding. I don't know. I can't dream of Nicole Kidman. I got to dream of this stuff. No offense. No. But I dreamed. I had these two groups. I brought them to International Golf Course in Bolton, just so that they could just sit down together, kind of talk to each other, compare notes, you know, kind of give a little bit, or maybe that's, and just find out what each one of them thinks so that they could better treat people with Lyme disease. Now remember, this is a dream. Before the luncheon even started, they started throwing bread rolls at each other. And it broke up into, you know, there was all kinds of problems and people left. But you know what? That's a dream, but that would happen. That's how the battle between these two groups, and I don't see it yet changing. It really hasn't, because there's not that much research. There's not enough going into it for research and so forth. I think last year the NIH, National Institution of Health, is that what that stands for? They acquired from the government $30 million for research into Lyme disease. That sounds like quite a bit. But no, I mean, other conditions got like 300 million. HIV got a lot of that money, you know, which is good. Breast cancer research got a percentage of the money, but to look into and research Lyme disease, just a very, very small amount. And there's a woman that she was going to try to come here today, but she has a couple of family members very sick with Lyme, and I don't see her here. but I want to mention her name. Her name is Kristen Catalano. She's from Bolton. She realizes this, that the money just isn't there. And she's done a lot to raise funds for Lyme disease, specifically for research and prevention and awareness. And easily, she had 2 golf tournament days. All the money would to go to Lyme disease and research. And she's, in just those 2 days, one each year, over $100,000 she's personally has raised for Lyme disease. So I forget. I've mentioned a lot of people here today, and I shouldn't do that because I always forget some, and they see me on the street and take a swing at me. But Kristen is terrific, and she's not here. Mr. Ngano's signaling. 3 minutes left?
5.
Oh,
Oh my God.
wow! I got a lot more to tell you, but afterwards, after the meeting, we have brochures. Michelle brought some stuff. I brought information about Lyme disease. So come up and get some of this. It'll be helpful. If there's only 5 minutes left, are there any questions? Yes.
Tom, I have a question. I know you were talking about the rail trail and how many ticks there are. Is there anything, any kind of a product you can spray on yourself?
Yes, there is. Yeah. There's.
Repellent?
Yep. It's called permethrin. Sawyer's, and you can get it over the Cabela's, I think, sells it, a lot of stuff. And it's a spray. You don't get it on yourself because it's toxic. But you spray it on your clothing, let the clothing dry, and the ticks start walking on that, and it kills them. It's not like DEET. DEET tends to just move them further up your body if you put it on your pants. But that stuff really works. It's called permethrin. There's something that you can spray in your yard. A lot of people now are spraying the what they call the transitional areas, because that's where the ticks are. They're not in the middle of your yard in bright sunlight. They're on those small areas where your grass turns to woods, and there's a little bit of brush. They spray those areas with, I think it's called bifentrin. I think it's so there are things you can do. And you can, they say, tuck your pants into your socks, so that the ticks can't, get in there. So one day I was cutting my lawn at home, and I did that. And one of the neighbors, one of the ladies, kind of fresh, she came over and said, "What are you, a trendsetter, Mr. Valerio? What the hell are you doing?" And I tried to explain to her about ticks and Lyme disease, and she said, "Oh, okay, go ahead." But I've never done that again now. I will regularly. But there is stuff you can put on you, and it does work. Is it you 100% sure then of not getting Lyme or getting a tick? I don't think so. Anyone else? Mr. Ngano?
Tom, you said about when I first heard about Lyme disease, it was always that target on your, on your skin that automatically said you got it.
Yes.
But that has changed now, so that you
Well,
don't always get it?
No, most people don't get a bullseye rash.
Don't get it.
No. And they don't get it. Usually, if you get a rash, it doesn't look like a bullseye, and it could be away from the bite site. You get bit here, you can get a rash on your leg. It doesn't necessarily be in that. And just once, I saw a lady with an absolutely perfect bullseye rash. It was just, you could have photographed that, put it in the textbooks for kids, and used it. And I said to this lady, she was a neighbor of mine, I said, "Oh my God, get to the doctor today." "Well, I'll call from a point." "No, call nothing. Get in your car," because it was obvious she took the tick off, and what you have is a little round mark in the middle, and then as the bacteria spreads out, you get the telltale bullseye rash. That's what happens. But most people don't get that, so they don't know. Sir, do you have a question?
Yes. I've heard that they have a vaccine for dogs, but they don't have a vaccine for humans.
No.
And cats don't get Lyme, but they have a vaccine for dogs. Why?
Well, there's a company, I think at the GlaxoSmithKline, a pharmaceutical company. I'd have to look in, but I believe they're the ones that came out with a vaccine. It consisted of 3 shots, 1 shot each month. My son got, because he worked for DCR, And a lot of the guys have Lyme disease, and he'd get ticks all the time. He had 2 of the shots. But some people, I can't explain it because I don't understand it, but with a certain, what they call gene sequence, we're getting severe rheumatoid arthritis from the shots. So the company, GlaxoSmithKline, realizing that they're going to get a lot of class action suits, they pulled it from the market, and they said there wasn't enough people showed interest, which is not true. So that's what happened. So up till now, there is no vaccine that I know of. There isn't any.
But they do have one for dogs.
They do, and maybe they get it. I don't know how well it works. That's a good point, though. You mentioned dogs. A lot of people get Lyme disease from their pets. Their dogs bring the ticks in. They put the collars on them, and it kind of protects them. But I know people, because you come into the house, they lay on the couch, the dog, the ticks fall off. Some of them are dead, some of them are alive. You sit there. A lot of people get sick from their pets.
And even the one for dogs, it doesn't work on all the strains.
It doesn't either? No. No.
Dad,
Yes.
since this is epidemic,
Pardon?
since this is an epidemic, and a lot of people have this condition and don't know they have it, what do you think about congenital Lyme now in this state?
Well, that's a good question, because can you get Lyme disease other than a bite from a tick? Well, some doctors say, yeah. Matter of fact, there's an article written, I read it a couple of weeks ago, and the headline was says, you have to be careful because you can acquire Lyme disease in the woods, but maybe you can acquire Lyme disease in the bedroom. They think it's a sexually transmitted disease because it's a bacterial spirochete. Syphilis is a bacterial spirochete, and they look the same under a microscope. So now they think maybe that is also a possibility. So if you were in college and you were dating a young lady, normally you would say to her, you know, what's your major, things like that. Now you would say to her, you know, when you were a little girl, did you ever pick blueberries in the woods? Did you ever, you know? But it's a serious thing. But it's not proven. It's not proven one way or the other. And again, that's a controversial nature. The other thing, mothers can pass it on to their child, to their unborn child. I hate to say that because there are doctors who say, well, we don't think that's possible. But there are a lot of them that say it is a possibility. So, you know, it's tough. The other thing, we got some more time. Nobody's knocking on the door yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay. There are 3 neurological diseases that might be caused by Lyme disease. And MS is one, Parkinson's is one, ALS is one. There could be a lot of different things that cause these diseases, but doctors think Lyme disease is a possibility. Imagine that. Last week, I have it here somewhere. This is an article. I like to read the newspapers on Sundays. I've got a New York Times and a Boston Globe. Terrific articles, terrific writers. This is, and I don't read the obituaries usually, but something about this girl's obituary caught my eye. She was 70 years old, researched, she was a researcher how people and computers talk to each other. She came up with a lot of different things that helped our current, the iPhones you have, a lot of the stuff she designed, produced it, gave her ability to create those things. But I just want to read you a couple of things. Her husband, Joel, says the cause of her death was sepsis, a complication of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm so proud I'm able to say the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Yeah, Lou Gehrig's disease. And I can do that because I had to read a book in college called Lou Gehrig, Boy of the Sandlot. And that's what Lou Gehrig died for. That's why they named the disease after him. But this lady, she definitely had ALS. It was confirmed by a lot of and it took a terrible toll on her. Usually you get ALS 2 to 5 years you've passed away, you're gone. This lady lived 22 years with ALS. Her name was Catherine Wolfe. She graduated from Tufts University with a degree in psychology. She earned master's and doctoral degrees in experimental psychology from Brown University. She did further postgraduate work at Massachusetts Institute of Technology and was then hired by Bell Labs, where she worked most of her life. This lady was a very smart lady. And towards the end, the only way she can converse with people is through her eyes, blinking her eye in certain ways, and that she can make letters come out. And she started writing. Imagine how the effort to go into writing novels and books. And I just want to read this to you. Dr. Wolfe did not confine her writing to poetry after ALS left her paralyzed. She wrote passionately about health care, the environment, politics, and her battles with her insurance company. Does that sound familiar? Her insurance company denying her certain medications that she knew would help her. She also advocated for the disabled. She wrote in an issue of Neurology Now, she described activities that patients with disability could get involved in. People say to me, why do you do this? Why do you have this desire to go out and to talk to people about prevention? And I never could really explain it. The next paragraph. Most people with neurological diseases feel better when they are doing something about their situation. I certainly feel better, she said, when I am involved in advocacy. It gives me a sense of purpose. I guess that pretty much describes what we do. And it's just a coincidence I happened to pick this up and read it. Now let me just read these two paragraphs. And you, all you people that have Fred and the rest of you tell me what you think this lady had. I told you she had ALS. But she wrote poetry, and let me just, which was witty, warm, sensual, and mournful. They excavated a life that had been turned inward by the devastation of ALS. Her final poem that she wrote was titled, I Didn't Know, and it was published in certain different magazines. And finally, her last day, she returned, when she was returning there, wait a minute, she recounted a birthday trip with her family to the running trail around the lake in Hillside, New York. This is where she lived, highly endemic area. Returning there that day reminded her of how much she loved nature, the afternoon sun glancing off the lake like a ring of fire, the leaves crunching down beneath her feet like little drums. And in the last two sentences, I never knew how many things I loved until I was in a wheelchair on the trail where I used to run. What do you think she had? You know, she had ALS, but the causative factor in this case, and there may be many, but in this case with this lady was Lyme disease. Be careful out there. I just want to read one more thing, Mr. Ngano, and then we'll see if they're going to throw us out. I don't think they will. I don't think they will, no. I don't know where or why I wrote this. It was for a newspaper somewhere. But they asked me, can you tell us what is Lyme? What's it like? This is what I wrote. Lyme disease, be careful. A tick infinitely small can change your life. It can take away everything that you crave for in life. It can easily take away your ability to work, love, and maintain friendships. In addition to a myriad of medical problems, it will empty your bank account and bring you incredible stress and sadness. It doesn't matter how physically and mentally strong you are. It makes no difference if you are rich or poor. Lyme is an equal opportunity disease. I know you can't change your life just because of ticks, but if you get Lyme disease, it can do just that. And I've seen so many lives changed dramatically because of Lyme disease. It does take, you had to get treatment before, you could see doctors that you paid out of pocket. People lose their homes, they lose their companionship. It breaks up marriages. Sometimes it's better if both husband and wife have Lyme. If just one of them has Lyme, the chances of that marriage breaking up are very high. Incredible as that sounds, but it's true. So, in closing, be careful. I mean it sincerely. And that's it. Any other questions? I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. I appreciate you
We have
being
plenty of
here.
material up there that we can take with us.
There's all kinds of material up here. Michelle brought some in. Remember her foundation, if you have anyone who has Lyme disease and they want a place to go. Second Saturday of every month, right? Yeah. And you can go on your internet at home, I believe, just type in Central Mass Lyme Foundation, and it tells more about it too, you know.